I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. But a very special warm welcome to you today, Dr. Jo Orlando, as my special guest. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
You have just written this book, Generation Connected, which I would love to talk about today. I should introduce you first to people, actually. So you are a researcher at the forefront of our digital revolution, I hear. You have a lot of groundbreaking research on things like digital well-being and digital safety, but also AI. And you've done a lot of research in Australia that shows it's not just the platforms we use or the devices, but it's how we use them and the strategies we use to manage that shapes how healthy or unhealthy it might be for us. Is that a fair description of what you've been working on lately?
Yeah, I've been working in this field for about 15 years. So mostly researching. So, what does that mean? So I'm not in a lab kind of dissecting people, their thoughts, but in homes, Australian homes, all around Australia, all kinds of homes. So just last week I was in the outback in homes in very remote Australia, normally interviewing, talking, observing children, families, parents in schools, really getting a really close-up look at how we all use tech, but with a real specialty on children and parenting children who are growing up in our digital world. It's really different from how we grew up, but it's also it's always changing. It's really hard to keep up as a parent with what they're doing, let alone kind of looking after our own kind of digital well-being. So it's just keeping up, explaining, understanding. And because I've been doing it for about 15 years, I've been able to see the path into it, how it's been changing.
Right.
So that's incredibly powerful for me to understand why we are where we are and the kinds of ways that we can parent kids that actually work. So you still have a good relationship with your child. So they're still talking to you because, those relationships are incredibly important. We don't want to kind of impose things that are really going to damage that. So it's a fine line. I'm a parent. I've got 3 children as well. Completely understand what everyone is going through. A lot of people feel really frustrated and quite disempowered. And that's why I wrote this book. It's just from the coalface, what's happening in families. Let me explain. Let me show you what to do.
Yeah, and that's great. I think so. Generation Connected, how to parent in a digital world at every age and stage. I have read a lot of parenting books because first of all, I'm a parent, but also as a psychologist, I always want to make sure I'm recommending things that are helpful to families. I gave this one 5 stars yesterday on Goodreads because I think it's really, really fantastic. Yeah, because what I love about the book is that you do run through every age and stage, right from birth to 2 years, right through to older teenagers launching into adulthood. And then you've got a section at the back that talks about a lot of the research and answers lots of questions, and it's fact versus fiction kind of set up as well. But throughout the whole book, what you do is provide guidelines for parents rather than those hard and fast rules that sometimes we hear. And I think that really promotes us to be able to, as parents, by understanding our kids, be able to be intentional about the quality of things that we're doing online, but also achieving balance as well, because not all kids are the same, not all families are the same. So I think in that way, it's really user-friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things that I was really, one of the reasons I wrote this book, because I feel that a lot of the time we're given this guidance, limit screen time, make sure your children are safe online. And you think, well, how am I supposed to do that? I don't know how to do that. It's these big kind of suggestions, but with nothing behind it, nothing kind of solid
That's
or
right.
practical. Like, how am I supposed to do that with my 8-year-old and my 14-year-old? Easier said than done. And I kept
Yeah.
seeing these kind of guidelines, and they're quite difficult for parents to read, because parents start to feel like they're really lacking in confidence in their own ability to be a parent. So what I've done in the book is just what you said. There's every age. So I start from just babies, and I take every age level up until they're 18, because every age level, in terms of not only the child development, but in terms of how they use tech, is different. So taking those big
Mm.
frames and really breaking it down for you. And all right, what does good screen time look for a 3-year-old? How do you manage
Yeah.
screen time for your 11-year-old? They're different strategies. So I just show you what are the strategies, and why do these need to be the strategies for this age group? What is it about this age group? And then the conversation starters and tips and what to do, what not to do. So yeah, very practical in response to those crazy big claims we keep getting as parents, because they don't
Yes.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll come back to that in a minute because I think that's worth talking about. But I wanted to just mention briefly the other thing I think is great too is how your research is all Australian, talking to Australian families, because I saw you say recently something, or maybe it was in the book, about um, how those 6 weeks of summer holidays is different here. And I'm in Brisbane, it's hot. And so often we will have a rest period in the middle of the day. And I don't think that that's something that is the same across, the US and Canada and that kind of thing. So it's great that it's Aussie based. Um, but the other thing too is, maybe I can't remember if I maybe saw you online the other day and you had been talking to some families rurally who needed to do their homework by
Yeah.
being near a place with free Wi-Fi. And my husband is a pediatrician who goes out or sees people remotely as well, who often are calling in digitally, and that's how they can access their healthcare. So I think it's really important to understand not only Australia, but the differences between
Yeah.
what is right in the city versus rurally as well.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I was in Outback, New South Wales just last week, and as I said, my research is everywhere and anywhere. So we can't just kind of give parenting advice as if your family is in the city. I'm in Sydney, you're in
Mm,
Brisbane. That's city advice, and that's in
yeah,
the book. But country advice is in the book. Remote, rural advice, because we're all kinds of families here in Australia, and I don't think in New York that they have a bit of a downtime in summer during their holidays. So that's the thing.
mm,
Our parenting style, our family kind of lifestyle is quite different here in Australia. And it's difficult to apply exactly, American advice or UK advice, which is what we tend to do. So yeah, that's one of the things I'm kind of pretty proud about, that we've got all this amazing data. I understand family lifestyle here, and this is a book for us, for Australians.
yeah, yeah. And there's lots of examples too through about how these ideas are implemented, but by different families, how they choose to do it. But overall, you talk about in the book the three forces of digital parenting, and one thing we need to think about is the tech side of things, obviously, and the tech design, but also brain development for each age and stage, and then also the social context as well. Can you tell us a little bit about those three forces and why they're all important?
Yeah, so those three forces kind of underpin the book. They help you to understand your 10-year-old, or help you to understand your 5-year-old. So when we use our device, it's not a simple thing. It's actually quite a complex thing, the decisions
Mm,
that we're making when we're on our device, when we look at it. So when your child is looking at their iPad and they're playing a game, there's a lot of factors that are feeding into why they want to play that particular game, how they play the game, the kinds of decisions they make in that game. So one is their brain development. So developmentally, where is their brain up to? So a 5-year-old's, say something like a 3-year-old's brain, 3-year-olds love repetition. Okay, they love it. They love to do the same thing over and over and over again. I know you
Yeah.
know that, Leanne, over and over again. So
I'm
in
just
terms of
thinking back to the days where it was like, "Oh, this episode again, okay."
again, yeah, that's because it's their brain development. That's kind of a really characterizing feature of a 3-year-old. That's why they like to play the same game on their iPad over and over again. That's why they like to hear the same
Mhm.
story over and over again. But it's also why, say you're in Westfield walking around, and they're walking with you. Remember that one time you gave them your phone,
Mm,
they get into the habit really quickly. So the next time if you go to Westfield, you give them their phone again, they're in the habit. So, that helps us to understand kind of their reaction, what they want from the screen, that kind of idea that their brain loves repetition. But it's not only that, it's also their social world. So if they're, you know, third in the family or the oldest in the family, or if they go to preschool, what's happening in the family home, their kind of social world has a big kind of influence on the kinds of ways that they will use tech as well.
mhm.
And then, of course, the tech design. So we know ourselves when we're on our phone, we get notifications or we get all these things on our phone and it gets us back on there. Well, for
Yeah.
children, they have different tech designs that actually draw them back into it, ones that we mightn't realize because we're not playing their games. So the three factors, their brain development, their social world, and the tech design, they all work together and they really determine how your child uses tech. But they also help us to understand, well, how do we parent well, with the
Mm,
kids' tech use? We can use these three factors. They help us to understand how they're using it. So they also help us to understand how we guide them, how we get out of those arguments, how we stop something happening that we actually don't want to happen in terms of their tech use. So it's a really kind of powerful framework, one that I've developed from my research. So you wouldn't have read it before. And it's really helped all the families who I've been working with have really helped me to develop this.
yeah, I think it just makes sense too, why because you're right that digital use, when we're using a phone, it's a complex process in our brain, but also knowing what the policy should be for your family is complex as well, and this helps it make sense why, because it's more than one factor, and then, for families of multiple kids, I have 3 as well, they're at different ages and stages, and so they have different responses to the tech, and they need different things, so I think understanding all of that then helps be able to pick a path that's gonna fit for your family.
Yeah, and it also shows that it's not just kids using tech. So there's not a one size fits all way of parenting them. It does
Mm,
depend on their age. It does depend on the social context and the actual tech that they're using, whether it's your home phone or sorry, your phone or your laptop or all these things. They all play into it. It's actually not complicated. It makes a lot of sense. So you say you've got a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, you read the chapters on those and help you to understand them as a tech user, but they're probably using them, in the same space. But it helps you to understand how to adjust your parenting for each age group. It has to be slightly different to work. What you use on a 5-year-old isn't really going to work with your 10-year-old.
yeah, and there's, yeah, exactly right. I think, the way the chapters are too, it's kind of that I feel like you can pick pick it up, and if your kid's in that older age group, you go straight to that one, and it's got all the information that you need there. Um, yeah, you you talk a lot about too having curiosity about their experiences, with the tech, and I think is that designed to really try and understand it from their point of view a lot more?
Yeah, it's a few reasons for it. One is when I go into family homes and I'm talking to parents, and a lot of parents are saying, I just don't know what to do. But what I often find is that the children are over there using their devices, and the parents are taking the opportunity to finish up their work or do things around the house because family life is incredibly busy. But what happens is, as parents, we kind of get a little bit removed from what our children are actually doing on their device. We know they're
Mm,
playing the game and we probably know the name of the game, or we know they might be on like Messenger Kids on a group chat, and we know the kids that they're probably on. But how many times do we actually like sit down when they get a bit older, particularly, and just do something with them? Just show me, what are you doing? How do you do that? That kind of thing. It does a few things. It does a few things really simply. One, you're showing an interest in your child, whether they're on their device or playing soccer, or showing you something they can do in their backyard. Their tech use is often a
Mm,
really important part of their kind of play and their world. So we want to take an interest in that. It's not like, oh, that's bad, don't show me, that's rubbish, because that sets up kind of particular tone. You actually want to be
yeah.
interested. You want to be open to seeing what they're doing. But also, that also helps you to understand their tech use, how they are as a tech user. If they're showing you their game or showing you something online that they've made, then they're actually giving you insight into how they use the device. And that's really important,
Mm,
because we can't
mhm.
make rules and boundaries and guidance unless we actually understand what they're doing. So we have to understand the game a bit, and actually have to understand our child as they play that game. It's not a lot. It's not sitting next to them every day for an hour. It's just coming in once a week, maybe sitting next to them for 10 minutes, having a quick chat, showing them you're interested. They show you a little bit. You just sit there. I've been doing it with one of my sons for a long time. I just sit next to him and he plays, and I'll ask him some questions, and I'll have a go, and I'll always be terrible at the video games he
Yeah.
plays. Like, I cannot do it. That's good though, because then they get to show you how good they are. It's a really nice situation. I think it kind of sits along there with just watching a movie with your child, or just doing something one-on-one. It's just a nice check-in. And I think, don't be afraid, or don't think it's not as valuable if they're on a screen. If this is a part of your child's life, then it actually is really valuable to check in, have a bit more of an understanding of what they're doing on there.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I have made a couple of changes, or did a couple of things since reading the book as well, which was interesting. I have older kids. And so one of your pieces of advice was to talk to them about things like the social media algorithm, and saying, so I've asked them both, what's on your algorithm lately? And one of them said, just American sports, like NFL and basketball, but the other one had something different. It was all cricket and something else. So it was, and I didn't know that before. I'd not thought to kind of ask about it, be curious. And yeah, um, I think sometimes, I don't know, we can see it as reduce it a bit to either good or bad, can't we? And
Yeah.
or just look at it in terms of time, like you've been on it enough, that's enough. But it's more about understanding what they're doing, the quality of it, and how they're interacting.
That's right. We do get we've become really obsessed about screen time. Like, and I think because it's really easy to measure, 20 minutes,
Yeah.
an hour, it's kind of a really easy way of doing it. But what they're doing on their device, I think, is even more important. So,
Mm,
one of the things I say in the book is that, 30 minutes of doing some kind of really creative thing on their device. They might be doing an artwork or creating music, like, amazing. Just as good as
yeah.
doing it on paper or using an instrument, compared to 30 minutes of just playing some mind numbing game or watching some really gimmicky video. They're all the same 30 minutes, but really different. So 30 minutes of passive mind numbing, not good. 30 minutes of creating something, um, problem solving, working in teams, that's a good 30 minutes. I say it's, you don't want to be kind of getting school lessons for them or anything. I call it hard fun. They're having
Mm,
fun, but it's hard. It's making them think. So screen time is one thing, but if you're really struggling with screen time, screen quality is a bigger thing. Is it
mm.
making them think? Is it giving them skills, or are they just sitting in front of the screen watching video after video that's just being fed to them? That's a different situation. So screen quality, yeah.
Yeah. I work with lots of parents of neurodivergent kids, who I think have neurodivergent kids in a whole interact differently with with
Yeah.
screens and tech, and the social interactions provide, their experience differently, and they feel a different kind of space in the lives of neurodivergent kids. But I think that's why I like the advice that you give, is because there's no real hard and fast about the time, which is often what parents get told, but it helps families decide about the quality and the impact on their kids, and
Yeah.
how a bit of a guide of how to make the decision about what the family policy should be. But I'm curious to hear from your perspective. You might not know the answer to this, but do you have have you found in your research an answer about the or how whether tech is kind of a way that kids can regulate themselves or not?
I found that one of the things that really stands out for me, and I'm not sure if this directly answers your question, is that a lot of parents tell me that in online games or some kind of collaborative thing online, that's the only space that their children feel like they're succeeding socially. So they mightn't have any
Mhm.
friends at school, it's just not working for them at school and it's
Yeah,
socially for lots of reasons. And I always remember my dad, not my dad, a dad, um, sending me this really, really long email. It was in response to something I'd said about that. And he's going, my 15-year-old son, and he was just so happy that his son was playing Fortnite. You know, a game that a lot of people are really against. He's going, I'm so happy he's playing it because he's always a leader. He gets chosen all the time. And for me as a dad, to see that he was just so thrilled that
yeah,
people were acknowledging his son socially, seeing him in a way that he was a leader, he was valued. So I think sometimes, the space online really offers different kinds of things. And I think that's really
yeah,
important to acknowledge.
yep. Yeah, I agree, and I hear that too from parents as well. And so maybe then it's about thinking about the quality of it, but then also you talk a little bit in the book about some signs to know whether it's the right time or wrong time, and is that kind of about how kids are reacting to the screen time they have?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. So if we go into those three forces, if we go into the tech one, the tech force, how the games and content is designed for kids online might be friendly in terms of, they're about animals or something like that. But the actual design of it might be something that really overstimulates a child. So say you've
Mhm.
got a younger child and they're watching, there's a lot of kind of kooky, very fast-paced, really colourful, kinds of animations that are really popular. And, I remember a parent telling me that, "My child is getting really kind of cranky and after watching it, but it's good preschool stuff." And, well, it's kinda not good preschool stuff, not continuously. A
Yeah,
young mind or a more sensitive brain just needs more pace. So if you're putting something fast and colourful and really overstimulating, it's really going to exhaust their brain, exhaust them cognitively. So we really
yeah,
have to be aware of that. It's not just the themes, it's farm animals, that might be a good theme, but how is it actually designed? Is it really fast paced? Because then when they get off, they're going to have a lot of kind of energy or just like be bouncing off the walls because it was just too much for their brain to handle. So it's really important to think about if they're watching these kinds of things like Cocomelon or those kinds of things, to pace it out then with something a little bit gentler, slower pace,
yeah,
just calmer because they can't be up here all the time. It's all in
mm,
how we're selecting it. So looking for tech design is particularly important, particularly for younger kids or children who get stimulated really easily as well.
yeah, okay. Yeah, so again, being aware of what the actual content is like, and
Yeah.
then observing how your kids respond to it. And there'll be so an hour is not doesn't equal an hour if they're doing different apps and games, right? So
Yeah.
you've got to
So
understand what they're doing.
what they're doing. So a mum was telling me
Mhm.
the other day, she said she's let her son onto Minecraft and he's playing this game. He's about 10 or 9, 10, he's 10. And his little brother, who's about 8, is also playing. But she said now they come off this game and then they're wrestling and they're fighting with each other. And it's for this reason. One, the game is just too overstimulating for either the younger one or for both of them. So they're coming off and they're just hyper because it's just been too fast paced, too competitive. They're getting really aggressive. So when they come off, what do they do with all that energy? They go for each other. So for that mum, so it's what's on the screen. So they might have only had 15 minutes. You might think, well, that's only 15 minutes. It's fine. So it's the content. So when they come off it, you have to kind of be prepared for it. If you're going to let them play it, and there's a lot of peer pressure sometimes, and that's where the social force comes in. Then they come off and do something quiet and probably separate, maybe a snack separate, or one takes the dog for a walk and one does something else. But some activities to calm them doesn't take long, and then you won't have the aggression and fighting.
Yeah, okay. I can relate to that. I have one child who just needs a couple of minutes after the screen time to just readjust to the analog world. And
Right.
then, yeah. You
It's
talked
just a
you
little
told us
thing, isn't it? It's just a few minutes. It's not a big
yeah,
thing. It's just a little, just to know to do that as a parent, it works.
yeah, that's right. And a bit of trial and error, finding out what's the right thing for each kid. You talked a little bit about how to, if there are tech things that you're not so happy with, to use the three forces approach to kind of think about that. Um, can you give us an example of how you'd kind of do that? For example, if you've, someone who's, yeah, how would you manage thinking about the brain development with the tech design and the social pressures to kind of solve a tech issue you're not happy with?
Yeah, I'll give you one example. One comes to mind. A mum was telling me that her 15-year-old was just becoming a bit more independent. Okay.
Hmm.
She had a phone, so she put on a surveillance app. So Live 360 is a very popular app with parents. But she found her daughter just kept turning it off. So she had 2
Yeah.
daughters. One was okay with it, but the other one just kept turning it off. And she's going, I
Hmm.
don't understand. Is she doing something that she doesn't want me to see? I just don't understand it. She said, we just keep fighting and fighting. I just want to know that she's okay. That's all I want to know. And then I explained to her through using the 3 forces a few things. One, her daughter's brain development was at a stage where she's really craving independence. So
Mm-hmm.
that age, her mum always connected to her, never kind of letting her be independent. She was really reacting to that because her brain development was kind of all about, it's time for me to be an independent person. I'm becoming an
Yep.
adult. That's where her brain development was at. Socially, you think, all right, what was happening with the child socially? I'm going to go to the mum socially, because these forces aren't just for the kids, they're for us as well, and the decisions we're
Mm-hmm.
making around our children's tech use. The forces for the mum, she'd seen lots of advertising for this surveillance app.
Yeah.
It was because she felt a lot of pressure that if she just let her child do things, she's a good kid, let her child just do things, that she was being a bad parent, because that's kind of how the advertising was giving her,
Yeah.
like communicating that message to her. So, and then when I kind of broke it down for her, then she got it. It wasn't necessarily her child wanting to do the wrong thing. It was brain development. Socially, the child was, she had a new part-time job that was influencing even more independence once again. But the mum, her forces were kind of working against this, mostly socially, the social forces around the mum. We have a lot of pressure on us as parents. There's a lot of stuff online, a lot of Facebook groups, a lot of advertising that make us feel if we don't do something in particular that we're a bad parent. So we suffer from parent peer group pressure just as much as our kids suffer from, teenage group pressure. So understanding how those forces kind of are working for both those people, it helps us to unpack the situation rather than jumping to conclusions. And then she was able to sort it. What she did, she took baby steps. And I think I'll put this one in the book. All right, so let's try it. Let's have the surveillance app on most of the time, but, let's just put boundaries around it. This
Yeah.
time, and slowly those boundaries just got less and less. So she the mum weaned herself a little bit off the surveillance app, and the daughter felt like they were making progress. So it worked. It was a win-win, but, a process towards it.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great example. And I think good to point out that the social pressures aren't just on the kids, it's on us
Yeah.
as well. And sometimes it's on our interactions. So it's for kids, it's how we're part of their social world. So it's how they see us use our phones and what that teaches them. Um, and you've talked there about a 15-year-old, but you start really a lot earlier in the book because I think um, sometimes we're not aware of what our kids are learning from watching us use our tech that then kind of lays that 15 years of foundation for then that challenge. So what is it that you would like to convey to parents about how things develop over time and early choices?
Yeah, I think it's really important. We always complain a lot about our screen obsessed teenagers, but they were
Yeah.
little, and there's one chapter in the book where I break down, okay, this is what's happened. This is your screen obsessed 16-year-old. This is what's happened in the last 16 years. This is how it's got to this
Mm,
point. And it starts from when they're very young. From the moment we pull out our screen, we are our children's primary tech role model. Okay.
mm,
We forget that about ourselves. We're their role model for everything. Um, it's not necessarily like idolizing us, but they watch our every move. You mightn't think they do, but you mightn't think that they do, but they actually do. Everything we do, everything they say, they're watching, they're
yeah.
scrutinizing any double
Yeah.
standards, they're going to pull them out, or, they're noticing. So the way we use technology around a very young children starts the whole process. Okay, so if you are feeding a baby, okay, got a young baby, and I know it's so exhausting. And a lot of parents will just kind of chill a bit on their phone because feeding a baby can take a long time, with the bottle. Um, that in itself does actually, that is quite a kind of a, how could I explain it? It actually has an impact on the baby. See, one of the things about bonding is it's this kind of eye connection with your baby. When you feed your baby,
Mm,
you're looking at them, they're looking at you. You just love them to pieces and you love them looking at you. Well, that's a really important part of attachment and bonding. Really simple thing, but really important. So if you're on your phone when you're feeding, you miss out on that, right? And your baby misses out on
mhm.
it as well. You might think, well, I'm exhausted, I'm on my phone, and completely get that. But it's just important to be aware that at that really early stage, your phone use can actually be impacting your relationship with your child. And you think, well, what
Mm,
would I do instead? Just want to have a bit of time, just want to check in, see what's happening on Instagram, or check this group
yep,
chat. And I think that's
yep.
okay to do that. But also, if you just want to, chill out using tech while you're feeding your baby, then just put on a podcast. You can still hear it,
Mm, mhm.
on some music, can still hear it, but you still got that eye connection with your baby. That's really important. And it just keeps going on. Those toddler years when we use tech a lot to keep our kids quiet, or just need a bit of time, or I'm exhausted, just, I know they'll be quiet. Being aware that if that becomes your go-to strategy, then that's what they're going to be demanding every time,
Yeah.
they want to chill out or de-stress. So we're setting up these habits for our children very, very young. So just being aware that what happens in those early years leads to how they are with a teenager and their phone.
Yeah, and that kids learn from what they experience much more than what we tell them.
Mhm.
And so we might tell them when they're 15, like, it's no good to be on your phone all the time. But if they have experienced that, when they are bored or they're waiting, that's what they do. For example, I think, when they're young and they're at a restaurant or in a waiting room and that kind of thing, that that's very strong learning that they have experienced.
Oh, incredibly strong. So I'll give you an example. Say you're going to the doctors or the hairdressers or shopping, and you just want to be quiet. You just want them to be calm and quiet and be good. There's a social force on us. There's a lot of pressure on us as parents for our children to be well behaved. When we're out of
Yeah.
the home, a lot of pressure. So a lot of parents will give them their phone. I just don't want my child to be crying in the supermarket, having a tantrum. I don't want to be that parent. But just being aware, if you're doing it constantly, then you're setting up the habit that's what they will need to be quiet, because they're used to it. That's what keeps them quiet. And it works. We know it works. But it's also
Mm-hmm.
setting up a habit that we probably don't want them to have. But it also it also disempowers us a little bit, because then we think we don't have any other parenting strategies. Parenting is
Yeah.
tough, but you need a lot
Yep.
of strategies for different times. So sometimes it can be giving them your phone, but other times it might be playing a game with them, or just putting some music on, or bringing in a toy that they haven't done before, or I would wrap things up in paper and they'd have to unpack things like that. It's just different kinds of things that are simple, and it is a little bit of work, but that's kind of parenting as well. But just being really aware, if you constantly use your phone to keep them quiet, to calm them, then that's what they will need very
Mm,
quickly, to calm, to de-stress, to go to sleep. That's what they'll be demanding. And then you get
yeah.
caught, you're so caught in this awful situation.
Yeah, that's right. And in the book, you've got lots of like alternatives there, like how to soothe kids without screens and alternatives to keeping them busy when they have to wait and that kind of thing. And as psychologists, we got lots of ways that you can teach your kids things like managing with waiting and regulating emotions and that kind of thing. So I think it's good to consider the alternatives. Um, and as we're talking today, I'm reflecting on how my oldest is 16, and when he was born, iPads didn't exist. There was a time iPads didn't exist. I remember I was there. Um, but then my middle son is 18 months younger, and just in that period of time, one of his first 10 words was iPad,
Yeah.
which is a crazy impact. And that's how quickly things change, I think. And so, I think I learned a bit from, not having mobile phones and iPads around when they were young, but that, kids who are born now, it's just so much, it's so quickly become a big part of our lives that it's harder for parents now, I think, to use alternative strategies than it was. Um, yeah. So I think it's great that your book's full of the alternatives.
Yeah, it has to be. Like, we live in a completely digital online world. There's no escaping. So
Mm,
saying that I'm never going to let my child use tech, or we're not going to have any tech in our home, it's a tough thing to stick by, for the life of their childhood. So understanding that tech is there, but tech is not always the solution. There's lots of solutions, and tech can be a great solution, but it's not the only one. And I think we can lose a bit of confidence as parents, thinking, well, I don't know what else to do that will work. But if you are continuously just bringing on new strategies, try them. Maybe they work, maybe they don't. That's okay. It's part of us learning how to be parents. And we always
yeah.
just keep learning as parents. Like, you're not like this amazing parents to start off with. You just keep learning. So your child will change, situations will change, the tech will change, their brain will develop. So you have to keep trying new different strategies, and some strategies will work for a long time, and some will just have their place for a while. It just depends on,
Mm.
if you think of the forces, what's happening in their brain at the time, what's happening with tech at the time, and what's happening socially to them at the time.
Yeah, so it's absolutely that you're not doing it wrong, it's just that
No.
things change, and yeah. And speaking of changes, we're talking just before about the, social media ban that's about to come out,
Yeah.
in Australia. we were talking how that's, in your three forces approach, that's just looking at the tech side of things. What advice do you have for parents in how to manage this moving forward?
Yeah, I was talking, and I was mentioning this to you before we started. I was talking to a mum yesterday who's got a 15-year-old, and she said, my 15-year-old is crying every single night. I just can't seem to say anything that works for her. And
Mm,
she turned 16 a couple of weeks after the ban, so it was really only a span of 2 weeks for this daughter. Um,
mm,
The ban is, if we think about it from the three forks, first of all, each age group will be experiencing this ban in different ways because
yeah,
developmentally they're up to different kinds of
yes,
things. So if you've got a 13-year-old who's affected by the ban, well, their brain development is all about like making social connections, and they're on Snapchat, and it's all about their friends and being part of it, you know. Um, Whereas a 15-year-old, it's still that, but then it's kind of bringing in the leadership and validation, that comes in a little bit more with that age group. So they're using tech with those kinds of brain kind of focuses. So
mm,
taking the social media away will affect them in different ways. So saying to
yeah,
them, well, it's for your own good, that's not going to work. That's a conversation that's
no,
definitely not going to work. So if your child is pushing back, don't worry, every child is pushing back with that. You
yeah,
have to think about it from the three forces. So this is how a lot of children will be thinking about it. Say 15-year-old. One is that from a tech design, the social media ban is really unfair punishment. Like, what have I done? They're just turning the tech off. If you look at it from a brain kind of point of view, 15-year-old, about validation. So they're on social media and they're getting likes, they're getting great comments and things like that. That really feeds them, It depends on the child, of
mhm,
course. And then socially, what's happening, and what's happening with them socially. Well, if you're 15, a lot of your social life and sense of belonging also belongs in the online space. So the
yeah,
social media ban affecting a 15-year-old, it's those three factors. So if you're having conversations with your 15-year-old, you kind of need to acknowledge those three factors, acknowledge why they're upset, why they're arguing about it. Well, it's because their brain is kind of seeking validation. They get a lot of validation from the online space, and simply ripping that away, the text solution, that hurts. They don't really get it. And you can see why they're pushing back if you think about it from that. So just
yeah,
saying it's for your own good, that's not going to work. You need to help them understand. You need to understand, the validation is really important for them. So having
mm,
conversations about understanding like why they're hurt, why they're upset, and then using those as a springboard to, okay, well, how are we going to do this? So if they're all about validation, then what are other parts that they can use where they're actually getting that validation that they need? And it might still be creative works that they develop online, and maybe they develop a blog or something like that. Other spaces where if they want to kind of showcase what they're doing, they can explore those kind of spaces. Or maybe if they're into art, working towards an art competition, just
yeah,
that validation that they want, the social kind of validation that they want can be channeled into other things. Whereas your 13-year-old, it's a bit different. They're all about kind of social connection. So I would really suggest to parents, well, what other ways? Well, if they play video games, there's a lot of kind of team things they can do on video games that they don't seem to be included in the ban. Maybe it's more kind of play dates and joining soccer teams, and where that social connection is there for them, because that's what they're missing. So that's the pathway
yeah,
for parents.
yeah. I think that it's really interesting that I think this is the group that it's hardest for, isn't it? The
Yeah.
group that have the social media and then won't. And your example of that 15-year-old just shows how important that social drive is at that age. And my son does not have social media yet. So I was saying, imagine if you did and then you have to not have it
Yeah.
for a year. And he said,
Mm.
oh, yeah, I'm glad I don't because I would have so much FOMO, which was really interesting for me. I wouldn't have thought about that. But
Mm.
yeah, if the social driver is once that's in motion, taking it away is quite problematic.
Yeah, I
Or
think when I do when I do my research, I interview and talk to tons and tons of teenagers, and the younger teens, like 13, 12, 11. I know they're not teenagers, but that kind of age group, they're the ones who are kind of okay. You know,
yeah,
anyone's going to be okay. They're more okay than the 14 and 15-year-olds who have been using it for a couple of years. They're the ones who are really reacting because it's so entrenched in their life. Whether we like it or not, or whether we agree with the ban or not, that's a reality for a lot of teenagers, and they do see a lot of things online that they shouldn't be. But for them,
mm,
there's also a lot of kind of value coming from it. And I think if you're going to be a parent and do this in kind of a way that's not going to have arguments every day, and we don't want our kids sneaking on social media without us knowing, so then we can't
mm,
support them. If they get into problems, we won't know about it. So you want to have these really open conversations with them. But it's those ones who have been using social media for a while, there's lots of conversations that you're going to have just to
yeah,
kind of settle them and transition them into a new reality. Like, it's not an overnight thing, it's going
yeah,
to take a while to
yeah,
transition them so they feel settled and they get
mm,
settled socially, and from their brain development and what it's craving, they're getting that in other ways.
yeah, that's right. Um, and also, I guess, understanding what their brain's doing at the moment, but also from a tech perspective as well. It
Mm.
just occurred to me that all of those things are set up to be really reinforcing. And so that's to just go from that quick cold turkey, that's hard for anything. We've all probably tried to stop something, like whether it's sugar or something else, just all of a sudden, and it's tricky. So trying to really understand it from their point of view, I think, is what can help us have these conversations.
Yeah, I think about it. If they're getting, like, in a day, tons of likes and comments, that's validation for them. So take that
Mm,
away, then they would feel like they have nothing, no one's even telling them they look nice that day or anything at home.
yeah,
So you can see it's kind of being ripped away, and it's so incredibly important to them at that age that
yeah,
how are you as a family going to deal with it kind of just on that day-to-day level? Because we don't necessarily say how amazing you look today in person, but we do it online. So that'll
yeah,
be missing for them. And that's a bit of a loss, for them. They would feel it as a loss. So how do you
yeah,
transition? Yeah.
yeah. Excellent. Um, I think, yeah, I think we've covered most things I wanted to that really wanted to talk about today. But the other thing is probably just understanding too a bit. Like, I think that the more we can know as parents about what the tech world is like
Yeah.
now, but also from our kids' perspective, that some shifts have happened, is helpful. So, for example, that some kids have friends that they only know online, and we can be a bit judgmental about that, as thinking it's not as good of a friendship as others. But to understand it from our kids' perspective, um, things like, yeah, that online friendships are real friendships, that they haven't grown up without tech, so it's something that's native and intuitive to them a lot. Are there any other changes you think parents should really be aware of?
Yeah, I'm just gonna to jump on that one thing, that we don't see their online friends as real friends. But a lot of us as adults, we just have colleagues that we only meet on Zoom, that we actually never meet in real life, who you develop a relationship with, professional relationship where you work with them. So it's kind of the
Yeah.
same. We have it in just a slightly different way. I think one of
Mm,
the things to be thinking of as a parent is the kind of talk you have. If you always have just negative talk around their tech use, then you'll find that your
yeah.
child will start to just kind of not come to you to talk about their tech use because they know that you don't like it. So we want to be really careful that we're not kind of shutting those doors. We want to have a really good
Mm,
relationship around our kids' tech use, particularly because we know there are dangers there, and we want to make sure that they come to us and we can talk to them and we can help them. But one of the things I want to say about the book is all those families, they're all real in there. So they've all come from my research. So I've just changed the names to protect
Yeah,
them. But all the
awesome.
questions, the case studies, the families who are doing this or, not sure how to do this, they're all real Australian families.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I love the bits where you get to that and then you're like, oh, so this is what this family did, and this family did it this
Yeah.
way, and this family did it that way. And it gives a lot of freedom for parents because I think you're right that if we feel like we don't know what to do, um, that's really disempowering. So I feel like this gives us a little bit of the power back, an empowering book for parents to use.
Thanks, Leanne. And I think if you don't know
Yeah.
what to do, that's normal. This just happens to be my job. That's how I know what to do. I spend my
Yeah.
life doing this. But I think if you don't know what to do when your child's crying, when their iPad is being taken off them, that's completely normal. I've got a section, just flick to that section and I tell you how to handle it. So it'll diffuse it and how to handle it practically.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for first of all writing the book, doing the research, writing the book, but also for joining me today to share your insights with families. I think this is a big um, social topic for us in Australia at the moment, and it's always good to feel more informed and connected as a parent. So really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Thanks so much. It's been lovely being on here too. Thank you. Great conversation.
Mm. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.